Hello my fellow kin, welcome back to the channel. What an eventful week it has been for the humble leagues of Votann. We had our brand new army rule previewed, a bunch of new lore featured on the Warcom articles, we even got a few teasers and snippets on some of our brand new data sheet rules. And then we got the whole CODEX leak, which, hey, personally, I'm not a big fan of when things leak because it feels like it kind of kills all the hype and excitement, and it's a little bit unfair to the company, but alas, it is what it is. So out of respect to GW, I decided to wait until Saturday when pre-orders would become available to actually release this video. Remember that next time, GW. I'm a good boy. So in today's episode, we are going to take a very big review of everything that's been leaked, everything in the codex, all the new rules, all the new data cards, all the new detachments and stratagems, and share some of my initial thoughts on everything in terms of rules, functionality, competitive viability, and things like that. Now, please do keep in mind, of course, in an effort to not make this be 4 hours long, this is going to kind of be just like my initial interpretation or my initial findings and thoughts based on the codex. We're going to go through all the data sheets, we're going to go through all the detachments, all the stratagems and rules, and kind of just see how things are shaping up on an initial interpretation or impression. Now, of course, we are going to have full featured detailed unit analyses videos for every single unit in the codex, in addition to full detachment breakdowns that will be coming out once I get my hands on the physical codex. So stay tuned for all of those. Now, with that said, this is going to be a bit of a long one, so pull up a chair, get nice and cozy, grab your favorite brew, and let's dive on in. But before we go any further, of course, a massive thank you to our channel members. Jordan Stuckenschneider, The Pulp, Sam P, Austri TM, The Biticus, Travis Taylor, Aaron Easley, Mr. Wolf, Realist Chance, Created by Philip, Q Seth, Ron Helton, Ham Sandwich, Droidiac, Last Dracon, Matt Castro, Alexander Swart, Chaos King Plays, Two Tone Terry, Johnny Fani, Fabien Dessert, Gigi the Groovy, Anomander Doorkicker, Ezreal Riziel, Kurt Williams, Brandon Murphy, Sanguinius's Left Nut, KLVI 800, Nicholas Stapp, No Sight Tactics, Quack, Remy Marchand, Wix KE, Lane Reed, Josh Griffiths, Benjamin Roberts, Honeyduck, Laser, and Matt. Thank you guys so much for your ongoing support. It truly does mean a lot. Now, right out the gate, I'm going to put a little bit of a disclaimer here for a couple of reasons. We do have access to the Codex included point values for all of these units. However, as I'm sure all of you are familiar with after playing this game for some time, all of these are extremely subject to change upon the release of the actual Codex. So there's always like a day one patch that comes out to kind of change the rules. So I will include them at the very end of the video for those of you that are curious, but just bear that in mind. All of the point values are subject to change. Now, the other thing I want to mention is I think this could be a little controversial, a lot of the changes to the army. So I would say forget everything you know about Index Votann. And I think if you forget everything you know about Index Votann and look at this army and this book as if it's brand new, because it honestly really is, this is a complete faction rework, ground up across their identity, across their theme, across their play style, I would even argue. So just forget everything you know about Index, and I think you'll be able to appreciate this a little bit more. So the brand new army rule, the faction rule that we have, essentially what we have are these things called yield points. How they work is based on the battle round that you're in, namely just either battle round 1 or 2 onwards, you will receive yield points for holding and controlling objective markers that are tallied up in your command phase. So for round 1, you're going to only score 1 yield point, just based off this rule. There are other ways to interact with it within the codex, as we'll see in a little bit. But just for now, essentially, you're going to be receiving a yield point round 1 for each turn that you hold, every command phase that you hold your home objective in your DZ. Then from battle round 2 onwards, it kind of takes a hold 1, hold 2, hold more effect, but for no man's land. And then you get a yield point for each one of those criteria you fulfill. And what you do with these yield points is you essentially juggle 2 army-wide rules that you're going to flip-flop between. So the first one, which I always forget what it's called, I think it's Hostile Acquisition. Hostile Acquisition is your default one that you started. Everything in your army when it targets something on an objective marker, gets +1 to hit. Pretty simple, pretty nice. Thematically, you could look at this like at the beginning of the game. For tempo reasons, you're trying to get onto objectives and secure them. So everything in your army gets +1 to hit when it's attacking something on an objective. You don't have to be on the objective yourself. Now, the other side of this rule, you get a second benefit as well, and it's that everything gets to reroll advances and charges. Pretty solid. Like, it's just really nice to have all around. Now, you will stay in this at the start of the game, and you'll remain inside of this, this like army rule side until you reach 7 or more yield points that you tally up inside of those command phases. So once you reach 7 or more, you leave hostile acquisition and you enter instead fortified takeover. Now, fortified takeover kind of has a little bit of a twist to what the initial one was. This time, while you are on an objective. So while these little guys here are on an objective, they get +1 to hit against anything else. So at the beginning of the game, you're kind of better at dealing with targets on objectives. And then as you secure them from those objectives, those fortified positions, you are able to get +1 to hit against things that are off of it or on it, doesn't matter. Like anywhere you get +1 to hit, which is really nice as long as you're on the objective, of course. There's also a second buff that you get as well while being in this second army rule. And that is basically everything in your army except for vehicles has -1 to be wounded if your opponent's strength is higher than your toughness. So vehicles excluded from this, as we'll unfortunately see when we get to some of the data sheets, like the Sagittar in particular. But in general, very, very nice to have. It just reinforces that idea of tempo where it's like, hey, this is my flow of the game. I am better at getting on these objectives. Now that I'm on them, it's harder to take me off as long as I have a high yield count. And of course, as we'll see as we continue through the Codex, there are plenty of ways to manipulate the amount of yield points that you have with some very nifty tricks as well that will let you bounce between both of these as you need. And there's also some stratagems that essentially let you pull from your pool of yield points in order to get an added benefit. So kind of similar to how the old token mechanism worked in terms of like the more judged they are, the better your strats get, except all of that's gone. All of it's gone, and we have these yield points now that interact with the army rule. It's like 100 degrees. Oh my God. All right, so let's dive into some of these data sheets. Now, of course, I don't have early access, unfortunately. GW, please remember this next time I ask. See, I waited till pre-order day to release this video. So let's dive into some of the characters and get some initial impressions. The first one we're going to touch on here is Uthar the Destined. Now, Uthar has received quite the glow up, and in my opinion is going to be an auto-include basically in every list that you take. His stat line is essentially the same, except they reworked his ability. So rather than reducing all incoming damage to 1, and you just get to flip a hit roll or a wound roll or a save to a 6, now what he does, the big one, is he has an aura of 12 inches, and once per round, you can target any unit within that aura of 12 inches, not wholly within, just within, and you get to reduce the stratagem cost of one of your stratagems, the CP cost, by 1. So you reduce the CP by 1, which means if you have something that's 1 CP, it becomes 0. You have something that's 2 CP, it becomes 1 CP. This is very powerful. It's extremely potent, and it effectively lets you get 5 free strats a game, which is really, really good. You can use it proactively on your turn or reactively on your opponents because, again, it says once per battle round. So very, very powerful. He still has that mechanism, that idea behind flipping dice to a 6 because of his dev wound damage to a weapon in melee. However, how it works now is once per turn, you spend a yield point. So one of your yield points that you have, you spend it, and this allows you to change one of those dice. So essentially, we're already kind of seeing that army rule interact with you could kind of manipulate how much you have to gain benefits or drop back from one version of your army rule to the previous one. So pretty interesting. I think personally he's an auto-include just because of this ability. Votann players have essentially been begging all of the edition to have something that provides CP back or like -1 CP cost, and we finally have that here. So extremely happy to see this. The next data sheet we're going to talk about here is Buri Angry Man. Now, Buri, my controversial little dwarf. last video, I said that his weapon stat line felt a little anemic, and this stirred the pot. This got some people riled up, and I still personally stand by that opinion. And to clarify, I don't mean he doesn't do damage. I just mean that it would be nice if he had more consistency and more volume built into his profile. So the lack of lethal hits, the lack of sustained hits. On average, he picks up 3 Primaris Intercessors. He does not 1v1 Dreadnoughts. He is designed, in my opinion, with a very powerful rule, which is Lone Op Stealth and Blood Surge. So what you do with this unit, I see one use case for this. Turn 1, you put him on the middle objective, and you tell your opponent solve this problem. If your opponent doesn't send anything out to interact with him to the middle of the board, you get your VP at the next turn, and you get your yield point, which is always really nice. If your opponent does send something out, and they decide to shoot him on the objective, right? Like they walk on the objective and they shoot him to try to get rid of him. Well, guess what? He's going to Blood Surge. If they're on the objective, they'll be close enough that on a 2 or a 3, you could probably hit him with the Blood Surge. You get into combat, you do your sweep profile. It's probably going to be some chaff. You pick it up. Very nice. The other thing that is very cool about this is that let's say they do get on the objective and they do kill you. On a 2-up, you get back up again. So if they don't touch the objective and try to delete you from it, you just resurrect on the objective again, which means you'll score it in your next command phase as long as your opponent isn't on it. So if they get on it and they attack you, you have a pretty decent profile for sweep into a lot of like the early game chaff that might expose itself. And if your opponent brings something more powerful onto the objective, then that's amazing. Our whole army is like mid-range in terms of shooting. They're right there out in the open, and it's going to be inside of the turn where we have the hostile acquisition, so our whole army gets +1 to hit against it. That, to me personally, is how this guy should be used. Just initial thoughts. I haven't fielded him, of course, but that's kind of where my mind is going at with this. So I think if you use him strictly as like, he's going to be my beat stick, I think you will be disappointed. If you use him more as a tactical piece in your army, I think he 100% has a place. My humble opinion. All right, next, let's talk about the Mimir. Now, the Mimir to me was a really interesting piece when they spoke about him in the article. The main reason for that was, at the time, of course, this week, this was really the only sense of idea we had towards how yield point manipulation worked. Like you have a Mimir, he's on an objective, you get an extra yield point, which is very sweet, right? Like when you think about it on paper. So this guy essentially, as we know from the articles, he attaches to Steeljacks, and his ability is that he could let the Steeljacks heroically intervene or overwatch for free. So there's a really nice combo there, of course, as we get to the Steeljacks because they overwatch on 4s, and their gun is actually kind of nice. There is potential for this to essentially have him be with a brick of 6. I'm thinking 6 of the shooting Steeljacks. They're cheaper from what the book indicates compared to the melee ones. You just put them on the objective, and if your opponent brings chaff out to try to OC deny you, you overwatch on 4s, you're going to be hitting spoilers with 36 shots. So the math is kind of in your favor there. There are ways to get additional buffs as well, which we'll talk about later. So I think this unit is pretty nice. Now, the one thing that threw me off a little bit is that he, physically, the model, needs to be on the objective to get your yield point. So as it's written here, it can't just be like you have one Steeljack on and you string the unit out. He physically needs to be standing on the objective. So for me, that one kind of, I would prefer, of course, if you could push him further back and not expose the whole squad, like get the benefit of cover, things like that. But of course, like it is just what it is. Keep that in mind if you run him. I think I definitely will be trying him out. In terms of weapon profiles, he doesn't really have anything that fancy. He has a pistol with 1 shot and a close combat weapon with 1 shot, strength 4 and strength 3 respectively. So this guy is really going to be included for that utility. So he assists with resource management, and he provides extra utility through buffing the Steeljacks, which again we'll talk about as we get to them. The next one up is the Arcanist Evaluator. I wasn't a big fan of the model here, but I will admit a lot of you made him grow on me just for the meme potential, especially from what I saw in that Warcom article where there was like a nice modeling set up and he's just like blasting a giant Tyranid off the side. It was very funny. So this guy, we all saw his weapon profiles. They're a little bit light in terms of number of attacks, of course. However, critically, they have damage 3, which, if I remember correctly, is essentially our only access to damage 3 shooting in the entire codex. So something to keep in mind. He gets lone op if he's within 3 inches of another infantry unit. So you could essentially, like, without attaching him, like, you just have him nearby, whether it's towards the Steeljacks or it's towards the Warriors, who got a pretty nice glow up. This guy gets lone op, and he allows you to just kind of shoot pretty far range, benefit of rapid fire. He has another benefit as well, which is for an ability where you spend 1 yield point and he gains sustained hits 1. And if he kills something, an enemy unit, you gain up to 2 yield points. I'm not 100% sure rules as written if this means you can choose 1 or 2 yield points, or you have to kill an appropriate number of units in order to gain that respective number of yield points back. He only has 1 gun, so I don't see how he can kill 2 units unless he somehow with 3 shots, or 6 if he's in rapid fire, kills like the bodyguard and a character model, which would then be 2 separate units. But I digress. Somebody let me know in the comments down below. All right, next up we have the Humble Cal. Now the Humble Cal, historically throughout all the index, wasn't really seeing that much play. His ability required him to stand out in the open for a whole turn and not die in order to give out a single judgment token. So let's see how they reworked him. He essentially has the same stat line as he did before with the 4-up invuln and the 3-up save. I think he actually went from a 5-up invuln to a 4-up invuln, if I'm not mistaken, which is quite nice. Now, his weapon profiles, again, same idea. He has his Vulcanite Disintegrator, no change here to the stat line, and then the Autok Pattern Combi Bolter, again, same idea. For melee, he has his Plasma Axe, which is damage 2, and then he has his Mass Gauntlet, which is 3 attacks, strength 8, AP 3, damage 3. He still maintains his lethal hit benefit, so if he's leading a unit, he provides the unit with lethal hits, which I will pause for a second to say have become incredibly important with our new army rule. You will notice as I progress through a lot of these data sheets, there have been some changes around how some of the keywords work on our units that were previously there, and a lot of them have been replaced with lethal hits. And this makes sense because the army has lost their ability to punch up with the +1 to wound into higher toughness targets. So with the lethal hits, it's sort of like a middle ground, a compromise, if you will, where gaining access to lethals helps mitigate against that loss of +1 to wound into tougher targets. Anyway, getting back to the character. So that's his main one. He still maintains that. He can still lead either Hearthguard or Hearthkin warriors, but he also has another ability as well. So once per phase, 1 model from your army with this ability can use it when it's destroyed an enemy unit. If it does, you gain a VP. So the Cal, if his unit kills something, you gain 1 VP. We're going to see that combos quite nicely with some of the other detachments where, for example, the main one, the index one that has moved over to the Codex now, just natively provides you +1 VP when you kill something. Look at that. Now you suddenly get 2 VP if this unit is the one to deliver the killing blow. And then, of course, he has his crests. It provides the unit with a 5-up invulnerable save, or he has Deep Strike for the unit as well. That's another change we'll see with the crests. They now affect the whole unit versus just the 1 model, which it should have always been that way to begin with. So again, pretty standard. The Cal gives you lethal hits, and he has the ability to provide you with more yield points once he kills something. All right, next up we have the Grimnir. So the Grimnir is largely unchanged in terms of his profile here. I can't see anything that stands out to me as being entirely reworked. However, he does have a couple abilities that have changed. So rather than providing +1 toughness to the unit he's leading, instead he now provides a 5-up Feel No Pain. This, if you remember, I think a year ago, when I was talking about my thoughts on the index, I said the Grimnir needed to have this, and they did it. They listened. The Grimnir now has a 5-up Feel No Pain for the squad that he's leading. This is massive, as we'll see in just a moment when we reach the Hearthkin warriors, who also received a little bit of a glow up. So you can attach this guy. He still has his Unbattle Shock ability. However, now it's within 12 inches of his unit, of him specifically while he's leading a unit. So something else that's outside of his unit can receive his benefit of being Unbattle Shocked. I think this goes a very long way in terms of improving his viability as a leader, because now he can actually have like several different instances of benefiting multiple units, not just the one he's leading. Provides a 5-up Feel No Pain to one, and then also provides Unbattle Shock to the others. It's pretty nice overall. Just 2 more characters left. Next up, we have the Humble Lioneer Champion. He used to be quite the powerhouse. I'm happy to say that he still maintained the exact same weapon profile. So his Mass Hammer is still 3 attacks. It hits on 3s. It's strength 12. It's AP 3. I think that actually went up in AP, which is pretty nice. And it's damage D6 +1. So still quite big. He did get a slight rework, so he still maintains his mortal wounds on the charge. However, rather than providing reroll charge rolls to the unit, he instead provides add 1 to your advance and charge rolls made for the unit. So this is significant, and I'm happy to see that it got reworked, and in fact, it's actually much stronger now. Because technically, if you are in hostile acquisition, as you'll recall, your whole army gets access to reroll charges. So now suddenly you have reroll charges on a unit that has +1 to charge coming in from Deep Strike. Theoretically, it allows you to essentially charge on an 8 rerollable. The odds are pretty decent. Now, he can still only lead the Hearthguard, and of course, if he's leading the Hearthguard, he can give the Deep Strike ability to everybody, so he can't solo Deep Strike. He has to be attached to Hearthguard to have it, and he could also equip himself with the 4-up Invuln Crest instead. Now, I will say something that is impactful. He did come down a toughness level, which is absolutely tragic in my opinion. He went from toughness 6 to toughness 5, and I could rant about this a little bit longer, but I'll maybe save it for when we reach the appropriate data sheet. Last but not least, for the characters, we have the Brokir Iron Master. Now, the Brokir Iron Master overall maintained the exact same profiles that I see here. Nothing too substantial has changed. He has anti-vehicle 3, anti-monster 3 on his gun, which is very much in line with the new Thunderkin profile, as we'll look at in just a moment. He has, for his abilities, very, very critically, he has gained Lone Op while he's within 3 inches of a vehicle. That is massive. Or Ironkin Steeljack unit. So if he is within 3 inches of the Steeljacks or within 3 inches of vehicles, he gets Lone Op, which is very nice. He should have had this, just like the Marine equivalents, for a very long time. The other thing he has is each time a model in his unit makes a ranged attack, they can reroll a wound roll of 1. So if he's solo, he's just going to, all him and his little cogs are all going to reroll a wound roll of 1. If he's leading Thunderkin, which is the only unit he can lead outside of, I believe, warriors, he's going to get to give them reroll 1s to wound as well. And then last but not least, of course, he has maintained his ability to heal, D3, and if you have one of the little robots alive, the assistant specifically, it's just flat 3 healed instead. So he's pretty good now, to be honest. He was always taken, and I think he still will be. He attaches to the Thunderkin. I was hoping he could attach the Steeljacks, but just the Thunderkin. However, he does have Lone Up if he's next to the Steeljacks, which is effectively the same thing, except they won't get the benefit of rerolling 1s to wound. So overall, characters changed significantly in terms of their overall use, in terms of how they played the game, but I think we'll see some of the more substantial differences as we look at some of the other data sheets. Oh, I didn't see you there, lad. If you're a hard-working dwarf like me, then you're probably always on the lookout for a really good Warhammer miniature deal. That's why I'm thrilled to announce the sponsor of today's video, Secondhand Geek. Secondhand Geek is a US-based second-hand miniature marketplace, operating predominantly between the US and Canada. They offer a secure, reputable, reliable, and community-driven platform that allows you to buy and sell used minis. If you're looking to expand your Votann roster or even get started with a brand new army, Secondhand Miniature is the place to be. Consider checking them out using my affiliate link down in the description below. It lets the company know that you found their website through me and gives me a small kickback at no added cost to yourself, so I could buy more miniatures as well. With that said, let's get back to work. With the characters out of the way, let's talk about the rest of the army. I want to kick things off with all the units from Wave 1. How have these humble, legendary heroes that we've used for an entire, 2 years transitioned over to the new Codex? Have they been upgraded, downgraded, side-graded? Let's find out. So, starting off, let's talk about the Brokir Thunderkin. The Brokir Thunderkin received a pretty significant change. I'm reluctant to say that it's bad. In fact, I actually think it's quite good, but I do feel like this one will be controversial. So they reduced, essentially, from the stat line, everything's the same except for being 2 wounds now instead of 3 wounds. This is pretty significant. It means that they're significantly more susceptible to bolter fire, damage to weapons, things like that. They still only have a 3-up save. They were never the most tanky units unless they were being accompanied by a Brokir Iron Master. So I feel like this was obviously a slight downgrade. However, when we look at the weapons and the actual ability that the datasheet has, I must say it's probably worth it. So Starting off, the bolt cannon. The bolt cannon is 36-inch range. It's sustained hits 2 natively now. It has 3 attacks. Everything's going to be BS4 for basically everything except for characters and like super elite units, but I'll call it out. They maintained their BS4, strength 6, AP 1, damage 2. And then the Graviton blast cannon. Now the Graviton, which essentially was the only weapon we ever saw throughout all of Index, has been completely reworked. No more does it have blast. It's completely gone. It no longer has anti-vehicle 2. It's gone. However, it is 3 shots. It now has anti-vehicle and monster 3 instead of 2. So you have reduced shots, but it's better into monsters now, significantly. It maintained its strength 5 and maintained its AP 2. However, it's damage 3 now. So this is, I said earlier the Arcanist was the only damage 3 ranged weapon that we have access to. I was mistaken. I forgot about the Thunderkin. So the Thunderkin have access to damage 3 on their Graviton Blast Cannon, which is an anti-vehicle, anti-monster weapon. It's pretty good. I think this is very powerful. Now, the other thing that they have, which I think is the biggest glow up, is the SP Conversion Beamer. So the SP Conversion Beamer used to be 1 shot strength 7, sustained hits D3 on conversion, which would be a 4-up. Now it's been completely reworked. It's 24-inch range gun. It's 2 shots. So each guy has 2 shots. It's still strength 7. It's AP 2 instead of AP 1, and it's damage 3. Very nice. Very, very nice. But more importantly, it still maintains the conversion keyword. However, the sustained hits D3 has been replaced with lethal hits. So with conversion active, every 4-up you roll on these guys is a straight lethal hit at AP 2 damage 3. Very, very strong. Especially considering in the context of losing +1 to wound, this is very powerful and really ties the unit together with the whole synergy and kind of playstyle of the army now. They also reworked their ability, which was Overwatch on 5s. They've given that over to the Steeljacks, as we'll see is a bit of a recurring theme. So we no longer have the Overwatch on 5s. Instead, you have access to essentially, after you shoot something, you strip it of cover. So it would be really nice if they benefited themselves from this, of course, but you have to shoot them first, and then the target loses cover for the rest of your army. You may be saying to yourself, well, that's a bit silly, right? Like our whole army already ignores cover. We'll get to that. So in short, these guys got a complete rework, essentially. They rebalanced all of their guns. I can genuinely see a use case for every single one of these weapon profiles now. Even the bolt cannon, which I do think is probably the weakest one available, being 36-inch range if you want to strip cover off of something, not a terrible idea. But I do think the SP Conversion Beamer, for me, is the biggest win. Okay, next up we have the Sagittar, my sweet, sweet baby. The Sagittar has come down, unfortunately, in toughness. It went from toughness 10, which was a very good breakpoint, down to toughness 9, which hurts a little bit. However, it also lost an OC, so it is now OC2. Additionally, it unfortunately also lost Scout. But it is not all negative. It is not all negative because the Sagittar still fills a very, very important role in our roster, now more than ever, which is splitting warrior squads. And on top of that, still maintaining a strength 12 gun in an army that lost +1 to wound. The role has changed a bit. You're no longer going to be using these as your very fast, aggressive, here are 5 Sagittars scouting up and staging turn 1 to dump berserks and warriors on objectives. Although there is still, of course, a very good use case to having these to transport them. But now you are using them predominantly to split your warriors, which you always kind of were. And they're not as fast, and they're not as tough, but they still have access to really good guns. So you essentially get 24-inch range on your Hylas. It's 2 shots, still BS4, strength 12, AP 3. The damage is D6 + 1. So the damage is a little bit more consistent. Your base is going to be 2 versus 1, which always sucked rolling a 1 on the damage on this thing. It did lose sustained hits D3, which, again, a little bit unfortunate, but it did maintain the ability to advance and then dump its cargo out onto wherever it may be, an objective or whatnot. So that's essentially all that really changed here. In terms of transport capacity, it still brings 6 infantry models, but it cannot bring exosuit, exoframe, or steeljacks, they made another keyword for steel attacks. Maybe they could have just keyworded it as one of like the exosuit one. I don't know. But anyway, so they could only bring essentially warriors, berserks, Jaegers if you really wanted to, and characters. So I still think you will see Sagittars around because it is the only way to split warriors currently, and the warriors are quite nice, to be honest, as we get to them in just a moment. But not the powerhouse it used to be, that's for sure. Next, we'll talk about our humble Jaegers. The Jaegers, I think, have actually maintained pretty much identical data sheets from what I see here at a glance. We still have that APM launcher. We still have the Magna Coil, the bolt pistols, the shotguns, and the plasma knives. They maintain their infiltratability, and they also have, of course, the reactive move of D6 inches. So they actually didn't receive any changes at all. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, they are literally the only data sheet that remained the same. I know some people were speculating that they would get access to some of their kill team war gear, like bombs and things like that. But it does look like they've just maintained the exact same profile, which isn't terrible. I still think Jaegers are absolutely amazing, especially when we talk about one of the newest models entering the range, the Capri Defender, which will allow us to split them up. And I do actually believe has a very good use case, especially now that we know that the Sagittar are no longer scouts. Next up, the humble Hurricane Pioneers. We used to see lists running 18 of these guys, 12 of these guys, 9 of these guys, sometimes 3. If you're Greg Chamberlain, 0 of these guys. But essentially, this is, I think, where some of the more significant changes happen. So the actual output is basically the same. You still have the high las, which is sustained hits 1. Damage 1, AP 1. You still have the Magna Coil, which is 3 shots, strength 7, AP 1, damage 2. You still essentially get your uppy downy. However, it's wholly within 9 inches of a battlefield edge now. So you cannot just chain yourself out and then go uppy downy. You need to be actually like tight towards the edge with all of your bikes wholly within, and then they fly away after, same as usual. Can't do it if you're in engagement range, of course. The biggest things that changed on the bikes, besides their ability to go up and down being wholly within 9 inches now of an edge, they lost their ignore cover. This is brutal in my opinion, and I guess I'll kind of share my thoughts as to why a little bit later in the video. But they essentially lost access to ignore cover. They maintained their, on a 5-up you get a CP if you spend a strat on them. So potentially a combo there with Uthar next to them, he gives them a free strat, and then you roll a 5 and get a CP, so you've actually essentially got 2 CP that turn for free, which is really cool. The other change that is quite nice is they reworked kind of the ignore stealth. So instead of just ignoring stealth, they ignore all modifiers to the hit roll. So right out the gate, it's like, it doesn't matter if it's just -1 to hit or it's stealth that you're providing. It's just, I ignore all modifiers to my BS, which is good, right? It's nice because the army hits on 4s unless you're in a specific situation where you're shooting something on an objective or you're on the objective yourself. So, you know, in a world where someone pops smoke or someone pops native -1 to hit, like Creations of Bile on their possessed bricks, you're going to be happy to have this ability here. So it's good to see that they reworked this to compensate a little bit for the loss of easy access to +1 to hit. The last thing is the Panspectral Scanner, which used to provide ignores cover, now provides reroll a hit roll of 1. And yes, this is correct. It's called the Panspectral Scanner, which for those of you who are well acquainted with the army will recognize it's a recurring war gear piece. And yes, it has been changed across the board for all our units. So no more access to ignore cover built into data cards. Now the next unit we will talk about is my favorite, the Hecaton Land Fortress. The Land Fortress has maintained all of his basic stat lines for his movement, toughness, so on and so forth. His guns have been changed significantly. Now he still has the cyclic ion cannon and the Magna and the conversion beamer. I've never seen the cyclic ion taken. I still don't think it will be, but it is D6 plus 2 blast, strength 7, AP 2, damage 2. I think it went up from AP 1. And the Magna rail cannon is now 2 shots, still hits on 4s, but its BS, but its strength is 18, -4, D6 plus 4. So a slight reduction in the ceiling of its damage, but you get 2 shots now instead of just 1. So we've essentially doubled the chance of connecting one of those damage profiles. Still has access to a warhead if you want it for a 1-shot gun. And then the conversion beamer here has been reworked. The conversion beamer I still think is probably going to be the best gun. It's 4 shots instead of 2. It's strength 10, AP 2, damage 4 flat. Damage 4 is absolutely critical, I think, in some matchups. It is extremely powerful at just picking up things like Deathwing Terminators, or what are they called? Deathwing Terminators? Deathwing Knights? Terminators for Death Guard. The other thing here is that conversion exists still. However, it's no longer sustained D3. Your conversion provides you, just like with the Thunderkin, lethal hits. This is good. It is not a bad change. I know some people are going to be very down on this, but you need to understand that the army has fundamentally shifted. We are no longer getting +1 to wound. Doesn't matter how many shots you have. You need to make sure that they connect fully to actually have a chance to do damage. And the lethal hits on the conversion is key. On a 4-up, you automatically wound. It's very good. So I still think land forts are going to be a popular choice, despite losing out on the sustained hit volume, and unfortunately, despite losing out on ignore cover, because just like the bikes, ignore cover is gone, and instead you reroll hit rolls of 1. So you've become a little bit more consistent. You suffer a little bit into things that have cover, unless you strip cover away with the Thunderkin, but you do have lethal hits, which I think is pretty nice. And of course, for transport capacity, they did change this a little bit, thankfully. So now you can take 14 models. I think it was 12 before. Now you can take 14 infantry, of course. And the exo armor, exo frame, and steel jacks all count for 2 spaces. Some of these used to count for 3. Now they all count for 2, which is really nice because you could fit, finally, 6 Thunderkin and a Broke Your Iron Master in a land fortress. You no longer get reroll wound rolls when you disembark, which is unfortunate, but you do have something else which is quite powerful that I forgot to mention. You get to ignore all modifiers to your ballistic skill all the time. If you're bracketed, doesn't matter. If you're in combat, doesn't matter. So you could charge into things, still shoot at full profile, shoot at different targets while you're in combat, full profile, no impact. This is very nice. It reminds me of the Riptide now. You still have damage for weapons, just like a Riptide. You still ignore all mods on your BS, just like a Riptide. You combo well with ignored cover through your other units, a little bit like a Riptide. And you're quite tough, tougher than a Riptide. So I do think that his points should come down a bit from 225. Currently in the book, they're still at 225. I think they should come down a little bit. Doesn't have as much raw firepower, especially things that are just EP1, like your twin bolters and your matter gun. But I think it's still going to be a very, very valuable piece to have in your arm. Next up, we have the Humble Hearthkin Warriors. This one here, I think, universally will be applauded. So we've essentially kept the same stat line again, movement 5, toughness 5, 4-up save, yada, yada, yada. However, the unit has a universal 6-up feel no pain built into the squad. So even if you split these guys up, you just have a 6-up feel no pain. It's not affiliated with a ward gear option. It's just natively Hearthkin Warriors have a 6-up feel no pain. Very nice. Added durability to the unit. Always welcome. In addition to this, if you split the squad up, the set that's with the Thane gets access to a 5-up invuln across the whole set of models within his unit. So this is, again, very much in line with what we're seeing with the crests applying their benefits to everything inside of a unit versus just one model. It's no longer a 4-up on just one guy. However, it's a 5-up on everybody, which is really nice. So you have all of these layers now of durability with the toughness of 5. You have the 5-up invuln, you have the 6-up feel no pain. If a Grimnir's attached, it's a 5-up invuln, 5-up feel no pain. It's pretty nice. It's actually quite significant in terms of a durability benefit. The weapon profiles, from what I see here, all look identical. Nothing has really changed. The Magna Rail Rifle, I think it used to be strength 9. I might be mistaken. Now it's strength 12. But everything else looks to be the same here. So I do think it's a big glow up for the Warriors in terms of durability, especially with the context of how the army wants to play now. With just 2 of the Wave 1 data sheets left, let's talk about the Hearthguard. Look how they massacred my boy. The Hearthguard, to me, are the only units in the whole Codex that I think were massacred. This is my early interpretation. Maybe some people are going to see something that I'm not here, but it was just like, boom, boom, we don't want to see you anymore. So I don't know why they weren't like super prominent before, but anyway, they went down from toughness 6 to toughness 5, which hurts. And I think you're going to see in just a second why it upsets me quite a bit, and I'll talk about that later. They still have a 2-up save, just 2 wounds. Leadership 7, 1 OC each. Of course, their ability got reworked. It's no longer -1 to be wounded because they would just get access to it if they were inside of the fortified takeover version of your army rule. So instead, they basically took the Hearth band detachment and just baked it into their data sheet. So they now have reroll hit rolls on your ranged attacks only of 1 into the closest eligible target. So just the ranged, just 3 rolls of 1, and it has to be the closest eligible. And you would think, my, if they are terrified of this thing shooting, that they're putting all these limitations in, surely the guns must have gotten an upgrade. Well, I'm pleased to say that the plasma gun did receive rapid fire 1 baked into the profile, as it always should have been, which essentially, again, they took Hearthband and just copy-pasted the rule onto this. It's 24-inch range on the gun. It's 1 attack with rapid fire, of course. They decided to gut the strength of this from strength 8 or 9, I think previously, down to 7. So you no longer wound even Marines on 2s, which is brutal. It's AP3 damage 2. The grenade launcher still has blast. However, the range was upped to 24 inches. And it instead is only D3 attacks instead of D6. And the toughness, oh my god, the more I read this, the more it's just negative news. The toughness, the strength went down from 4 to 3. And then the Vulcanites still maintained their dev wounds, same stat line, 3 shots. However, from a land fortress, you no longer have the reroll wound rolls. There are ways to get it through the detachments and the stratagems, but just natively coming out of a fort, these guys are not the same as they used to be. So a little bit unfortunate, and it gets a little sadder when we look at the melee. So the concussion gauntlet here is strength 8, AP2 damage 2. I think it went down as well. The graviton hammer, slight buff for anti-vehicle, anti-monster, and then the plasma blades are 3 attacks each at strength 6, AP2, 1 damage. So the whole squad gets a 5-up invulnerable save if you have the Weaver-filled crest, or of course you give them deep strike with the deep strike crest. This is, out of all of the units in the Codex, I think this is the only one that makes me very sad. Like, very, very sad. But, hey, maybe for now I just didn't see it yet. When we do a deep dive take on the detachments, there's combos that are going to click. But for now, very sad. All right, last but not least, for the Wave 1 units, we have the Chthonian Berserks. These guys got a glow up and a half. They were already taken all the time in batches of 15, 20, and even 25 in some lists, and I don't see that going away personally. So they went down a wound. So everybody's 1 wound, even the big base for the mole grenade launcher, 1 wound. However, 4-up feel no pain for everybody. Not just a 5-up, it's a 4-up for everybody. So half the number of wounds that go through you will save. However, they are more susceptible to damage to weaponry now, which is very prominent in the game. They went up from toughness 5 to toughness 6. So these naked men are toughness 6, and my Hearthguard are toughness 5. How? How is this possible? But alas, I digress. So the mole grenade launcher still exists, 18-inch range blast and direct. The profile is still the same. However, when it hits something now, it no longer provides on the 4-up the slow. Instead, you just turn off Overwatch instantly. You don't roll a dice, you turn off Overwatch, which is very good. This is powerful. I would not say this is a nerf. This is very nice to have because there was no way for us to interact with this before playing against Death Guard. It's a nightmare to come out and charge something. Now, one squad shoots, the other squad charges, and you don't have to worry about getting overwatched with anti-infantry too. The concussion maul was reworked completely. So the concussion maul is 3 attacks. It hits on 4s. It's strength 5. It's AP 2. It's damage 3 still, but the strength went from 9 to 5. However, I still think it's actually better now because it's gained anti-monster and anti-vehicle 3. The way I look at this is everybody was taking the mauls because they were just so good into every profile. So you would take the mauls and you would wound infantry on 2 if they're double judged, and you would wound vehicles and monsters on 4s because you would go from 5s to 4s. So now you are right out the gate significantly better at dealing with monsters and vehicles with this unit because you wound them on 3s now due to the anti-vehicle and monster keywords. But it's just not like, it's still fine into like infantry because it's strength 5, it's AP 2, it's damage 3. However, it's not just everybody runs in with a maul and kills whatever they attack. Now, you actually have to make, I think, a conscious choice between taking the heavy plasma axe or the maul. And the plasma axe has received a glow up. The plasma axe is now 3 attacks flat. It's a weapon skill of 4, strength 7, AP 2, damage 3. So now you have damage 3 plasmas that are on strength 7, so you'll wound most elites, basically every elite in the game, on 3s. Very nice. Versus the plasma axe, which against like toughness 6, toughness 7, you're going to wound them on 5s. Versus the mauls. So the plasma axe, there is actually a debate to be had now versus like, what do I need this unit to do while you're list building? Do I want something that is better at dealing with monsters and vehicles? Or do I want damage 3 in melee versus elites? So I think this is really well done. And then of course the Twin Concussion Gauntlet still exists. The last thing that changed with this unit is their fight on death. So there's a little bit of an interaction here with your army rule. So if you are inside of the fortified takeover portion of your rule, it's +1 to whatever you roll. So you essentially fight on death on 3s instead of 4s, which is really nice, a slight buff. It might not always come up, of course, but if you are like with this unit potentially like on an objective marker and they charge you and you're holding it and you're in fortify, now you hit them on 3s, you fight on death on 3s, it could quickly ramp up. So I think overall the Berserks had a very nice upgrade despite some rework. I think they came out as one of the winners. And with Wave 1 out of the way, let's take a look at what awaits us in the upcoming Wave 2. Kicking things off, we have the Capricus Defender, the Sunny D, the Capri Delight, as I have coined it. The Capri has essentially taken over the Sagittar's job, whereas the Sagittar has now become more, well, less durable, but still like it plays the role of like a durable tank that's toughness 9 and it has some strength 12 guns. It splits the warriors up. Our first forward push will come from the Capris. So the Capricus Defender has a movement of 12. It's toughness 7, 4 up save, 7 wounds, 7 up leadership, and 2 OC. And this one here specifically, the defenders are the gun variant. So in terms of weapon profiles, they essentially have access to like a mix between magnas, like the magnas on the warriors, and some of the guns that are on the bikes, but they're better. They're better variants. So for example, like the Hylas rotary cannon on this vehicle is 6 attacks still, but it's 2 damage instead of 1, and it still maintains sustained hits. So this is already quite potent. It then also has the twin magna coil, which the bikes have. However, this one is 3 shots and it has twin linked. So it has fewer number of shots than a squad of 3 bikes, obviously, but it gets to re-roll because of the twin linked. Then the last thing it has is the Magna Rail Cannon. And so you're going to be obviously choosing between if you want to have the Magna Rail Cannon or the Hylas. The Magna Rail Cannon is 1 shot on BS4, strength 14, AP 4, D3 plus 3 damage. So this is a new answer that we have to the anti-tank problem. You can load up a list full of these Magna shots, get +1 to hit if you're on an objective theoretically, or +1 to hit if they're on an objective, and just start blowing things up. So strength 14 is pretty high. You're going to wound basically everything in the game on 3s. And the damage here, well, AP 4 and the damage, of course, D3 plus 3. It has Scout 9, so its Scout move is as fast as the bikes, faster than the Sagittar used to be. And the ability here is after you shoot, you can scoot. So you get to make a move of up to D6 inches after you shoot with this vehicle. So you could kind of play a game that we never really had access to before, where you pop out, you shoot something, and then you just D6 and hide back behind the ruin, which is really, really nice and fills something that we lacked in terms of tools and rule sets. It has smoke as well. The first Votann unit to have smoke, which is obviously a big win. Smoke adds a significant layer of durability. Now, the thing that I was most surprised to see, and the thing that pains my wallet the most, is that you can take these in squads of 2. It's very good, but it's very monetarily expensive. So you can essentially have squads of 2 Capri defenders, and if they're cheap enough, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't. You can essentially have 6 of these things driving around the battlefield in squads of 2. They move, shoot, move. They scout 9 each. They're decently durable at 7 wounds, so the whole unit is toughness 7, 14 wounds to chew through. Yes, it has a save of 4 up, but whatever, you'll probably have access to cover because you're a vehicle. And I think it's very strong. I genuinely think it's very, very strong, and you will definitely see these in lists. And I just can't believe that they're taking it in 2. Now, the second build variant that you get on these Capri Defenders are the Capricus Carriers. This is the transport variant. So the guns are essentially the same, but a little toned down. So you have like a Magna autocoil and the autocannon, whatever. But essentially the big thing is here, you scout 9 still, and you have firing deck, and you can fit 5 Jaegers. So at the beginning of the game, you can split 5 Jaegers up. So myself and a lot of other people at the start, when the rules got previewed, were kind of like iffy on this. Like, is there any real use case to having Jaegers split up? I personally think that now there is. Because now you're Sagittarius Law Scouts, so you have 5 Jaegers that infiltrate somewhere, and you could reserve 5 inside of this transport, drive it up somewhere else on the board, and use it as an early game, cleanse or area denial or something like that. This gets you into that turn 1 staging point to spit 5 guys out that are probably going to be about 45 points. So I think one of these is almost mandatory in a list, in my opinion. Next up, we have the Steeljacks. Now, the Steeljacks, another controversial unit here. I am going to say that they have an interesting profile. Now, they move 5 with their long legs. They have a toughness of 6, so they took the toughness away from the Hearthguard. They have a 2-up save, 3 wounds, so they took away a wound from the Thunderkin. Leadership 7, OC 1. Now, you have the 2 variants, right? You got like the melee and the ranged variant. Personally, I'm leaning more towards the ranged. So the ranged guys have the Dev Wound Gun. However, it's 6 shots each. So if you take a squad of 6 of these, it's 36 shots. If you overwatch on 4s, that's 18 hits on average, right? Kind of decent. And it's AP 1, damage 1. It has Dev Wounds. There are a lot of strats in the game, in the detachments that provide you with full rerolls. So there is potential to spike on these and potential to get a lot of devs that go through as well. So I actually quite like this, and it makes sense how you could frame this as an objective holder, because you put 6 of these on with the Mimir, something comes on like the OC dump to like deny you primary, you overwatch with 36 shots on 4s, dev wounds, you'll probably pick up a significant portion of that unit. So I think these are quite nice, and of course they have their precision crest. And their melee is actually quite decent, to be honest with you. So you have like, most of them have plasma knives, so it's like 2 attacks at 6-2-1, and then you have the plasma sword on the Thane, which is like sustain hits 1, 6 attacks at strength 6, AP 2, damage 1. And I think for this reason, I'm a little reluctant to say that the melee variants are going to be in flavor. I think the ranged are going to probably be better, because the melee ones give you 3 attacks each at strength 10, AP 2, damage 2, with the concussion gauntlets that have lethal hits, which are the concussion gauntlets that the Hearthguard have. So the Hearthguard lost strength, and it was taken from them and given to these guys instead, which was my fear. But alas, I guess they're robots, so they hit a bit harder because they're like made of steel. Sure. So I think personally, I'm siding with the Vulcanite ones versus the melee, just at an initial glance, of course. And they do have an ability here, which is if something falls back and it's battle shocked, it takes a desperate escape at a reduced roll. So like you subtract 1 from the rune roll, and if it's not battle shocked, I think it just takes a regular desperate escape. And of course it has precision in melee, which... Last but not least, we have the Chthonian Earthshakers. So we did get a full preview of the damage stats here, so just to save time, I'll skip through that. But in terms of ability, so they have 2 different abilities depending on which variant you build, which is interesting. I don't think we've seen many of this. Now, the first one is if you take the damage 2, twice per game, you get to reroll your wound rolls. So already we're seeing a little bit more efficiency come out of this unit, which is quite nice. Now the other one is for the Tremor Shells, which is the D6 plus 4 blast shots. For this one here, essentially, after you shoot something, it takes a battle shock test at a negative modifier of 1. It's fine. You know, if you have a few of these things and they're like always forcing battle shocks at -1, you could potentially swing primary that way. So I'm not going to say it's terrible, because it actually does have a use case. And we're going to see in some of these attachments, I think the Earthshakers are kind of pivotal to having some pretty good efficiency for primary play, which again, we'll talk about later on. If you guys are still watching at this point in the video, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. If you're enjoying the content so far, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment for me down below. Let me know what you think about some of these data sheets so far as we make our way through the detachments. Now, again, before we jump into the detachments, I'll just add, this is really just to save time. We're going to kind of just go through these and I'll share my thoughts on them. But we will have dedicated full feature videos for each one of these coming out in the coming weeks. So the first detachment I want to talk about here is the original index, how it's been reworked, and let's see how it shapes up with the new codex. So this one here, the Oath Band, our army rule, the detachment rule I should say, is super simple and straightforward. Every time an enemy unit is destroyed, you gain a yield point. So already, this is a detachment where you're kind of going to leverage that yield point economy a little bit more. You get a yield point for killing stuff. If you cal kill stuff, you get a yield point. Being on objectives, you get yield points. Mimirs add yield points. So there potentially is a world where you stack these up quite quickly, and it is a necessity, as we'll see with some of these stratagems. Talking about the enhancements, we have Oathbound Speculator, which I think is actually a really good one. So this one here, you attach it to a model, to the leader, of course, and every time a model in the bearer's unit makes an attack, melee or ranged, you reroll a wound roll of 1. However, if you spend 3 yield points, you get to add 1 to the wound roll. So we do have access to +1 to wound, which is nice. Now I'm thinking about something like this, personally, right out the gate. I know I said I'd do this quickly, but I can't help but say it. I feel like this on a Mimir leading 6 Steeljacks is going to be pretty sweet. Why is that? Because you overwatch on 4s with 36 shots, and you get +1 to wound, your strength 6, so you'll probably wound a lot of things on 2s. If they're infantry coming on the objective, then you got AP 1, damage 1 or 2, I forget, and you got your dev wounds. So I think this is a pretty cute combo. Of course, you could stack this up on something that's a little bit more melee-centric, maybe your Hearth Guard, give them a little bit more of a punch. But I think a very powerful enhancement just to kick things off. Next up, we have Dead Reckoning. So a Leagues of Votann model, at the end of your turn, if the bearer is on the battlefield and you spent no yield points that turn, you gain 1. This is pretty cute actually, because what it essentially means is at the end of every turn, if you didn't use 1, you'll get it. So round 1, whereas you're only going to get 1 on your turn, 1 on your opponent's, you'll actually get 2 on your turn, 2 on your opponent's, if you don't use any, of course, which you probably won't this early on. And then if you have, like, let's say you kill something with your detachment rule, you'll be on 5. So you'll be on 5 for round 2, which is a pretty significant lead compared to some of these other detachments that we see. Next up, Iron Ambassador. So Iron Ambassador, essentially, it makes your Autok pattern combi bolter go up to damage 4 depending on the number of yield points you spend. So you can spend yield points and you'll go from, like, each point you spend will add a point of damage to this gun. So essentially you'll get a 4-shot AP 0 strength 4 gun on, like, your E-champ that's damage 4. It's funny. I don't know if it's good because it's AP 0, but it's damage 4, which is kind of nice to see. But again, you have to spend these yield points, and I do suspect there are probably better things you'll be spending them on because 3 is quite steep. Next, you have Ancestral Crest. So this one here is actually really nice, and I think there's some cool tech with this one as well. So essentially, once per turn, when you target the bearer's unit with the command reroll stratagem, the bearer can use this enhancement. If he does, you could spend a yield point and reduce the cost of that strat by 1. So for your command reroll, it's essentially free if you spend a yield point. What you can do is if you wanted to reduce your yield points to enter back into hostile acquisition for some reason, what you could do is every turn just advance this guy and CP reroll. So you advance him, you don't even move him, you just advance him, see what you get, CP reroll it for free using a yield point, and now you've found a way to basically every turn reduce your yield point count if you want it to drop below a threshold. Now in terms of strats, we have Armor Contempt, of course, hasn't gone away here. We then have, as we saw previewed, you can increase your AP and melee based on the number of yield points that you expend. So yield points being pretty significant here. Same idea with the sustained hits too. If you expend your yield points, you get sustained hits too. And then we have something called Hunter's Mark, which is new. Hunter's Mark lets you re-roll a hit roll and a wound roll of 1 for a unit that has not been selected to shoot yet. So in the shooting phase, reroll a hit roll or wound roll of 1. So this is nice. It just makes your shots a little bit more consistent, considering that you're hitting on 4s and you don't really have access to the -1, the +1 to wound. You then also keep your reactive reprisal, so for 2 CP, if something shoots you, you could shoot it back. It does come up sometimes, and of course, if Uthar is nearby, he could reduce the cost down from 2 to 1, which is a significant boost. And then last but not least, you have our very tactical fallback shoot and charge, still on everything in the army. No limitation here for vehicles. It still applies to everything. So I do think right out the gate, the Oath Band detachment still remains to be, as is the tradition with all these codexes, the most like flexible one, I would say. It really just doubles down on what your army rule is, lets you play the game really good, and gives you all the tools you need to play a good game of 40k. So I think this detachment is not going anywhere. You're still going to see it, and in fact, it's probably going to be one of the more popular ones outside of maybe the Berserk. Next up, let's talk about the Persecution Prospect. I don't know what it is about this one, but it's the one that gets me the most excited. And I was never a big fan of the Hearth models, but for some reason, this one is just screaming to me. I don't know if it's the best one. In fact, I don't think it is, but I still think all of these attachments are competitively viable in the right context. And I think this one definitely has play as well. So essentially, everything in your army, if it's Leagues of Votann, becomes a guerrilla adept at the beginning of the game. And what it does is, if you shoot something, it becomes assailed, except for monsters and vehicles. So those are excluded. You cannot assail a monster or a vehicle unless you use an enhancement, which we'll talk about in a moment. So essentially, anything shoots it. I shoot your infiltrators, they are assailed. If I shoot them a second time with a different unit, they become pinned. And if they're pinned, it's -2 to move and charge, which is pretty interesting. So for enhancements, the first one here, Eye for Weakness. Each time a model in the bearer's unit makes an attack that targets an assailed unit, +1 to wound. So you can very quickly apply +1 to wound on a key unit as long as something else shoots it. And I think there's one unit in particular that comes to mind for me here that can pretty much shoot anything on the board. We'll talk about that later. So I think it's really nice to just get a little bit more of a damage punch into some tougher targets. Writ of Acquisition, a Leagues of Votann model only. In your shooting phase, after the bearer's unit has shot, you gain 1 yield point for each assailed enemy unit hit by one or more of those attacks. So if you split your attack somehow, well, then you're going to be able to allocate and ramp up some more yield tokens more quickly, depending on if those targets were assailed or not. Next up, we have Surgical Saboteur, and essentially here in your shooting phase, after the bearer's unit has shot, select one monster or vehicle unit hit by one of those attacks, and until the start of your next shooting phase, that unit is pinned. So instantaneously, this model can pin a vehicle or monster directly. You don't have to assail it first, because obviously your army rule, your detachment rule doesn't let you assail at all. But if you have this enhancement, a unit can select a monster or vehicle and just instantly pin it for -2 to move, -2 to charge. Last but not least, we have Nomad Strategist. So essentially, you can spend up to like 4 yield points, and you can pick up a certain number of Hearth models and put them back into reserve. I'm not entirely sure how helpful this one is, considering that the bikes already go uppy downy. You can't do it in engagement range, so it's not super relevant for that. And then outside of the Jaegers, I wouldn't really want to bring my Jaegers up and down. So maybe the only unit that's left would be the new Capricus Defenders. Again, not 100% sure if I want them up and down. They already have a reactive move after they shoot, so they could shoot something and move away. But still, it is an option if you think of some tech with it. In terms of stratagems, of course, we have 6 available to us. Now, the first one is at the start of any phase if units from your army have the Fortified Takeover. So you need to be in the second version of your army rule to be able to use this stratagem. 1 Leagues of Votann character unit from your army. Each time you use this stratagem, you can spend any number of yield points. Once you have done so, if you have 6 or fewer yield points until the start of your next turn, you switch over to Hostile Acquisition. So essentially, it's a reset button to hop between version 2 down to version 1. So you just clean expend all of your yield points and start back at the original one as long as you're below 7. The next one, Frontier Momentum. So in your movement phase, 1 Hearth unit from your army that has not been selected to move this phase, instead of rolling an advance roll for the unit, you just flat advance 6. Always very powerful for setting up things like move blocking with your humble 5-man Jaeger squad. Or, of course, maybe even your vehicle if you want to move it up somewhere aggressively. Next up, we have Exposed Flaws. Now, this is in your shooting phase. Any Hearth unit that's selected to shoot, you can spend 2 yield points optionally. And essentially, if that unit is assailed, you get to re-roll your wound roll. And if you spent the 2 yield points, you just get to re-roll your wound roll regardless of what stage they're in, of assailed or pinned or nothing. Next up, we have Ranger Tactics for 1 CP. So Ranger Tactics here, your shooting phase, 1 Leagues of Votann unit from your army that has not been selected to shoot this phase. If you're targeting an assailed unit, you can re-roll the hit roll. Or if you're a Hearth unit, you just re-roll the hit roll, doesn't matter if they're assailed or not. So this, I think, right out the gate, very powerful. I know I don't want to spend too long talking about these, but what screams to me as take me in this list, in this detachment, are the 3 artillery pieces. Of course, accompanied by Uthar. So essentially, you would shoot with 1 across the board, and you would assail a target. The next one can shoot and pin a target, and you can optionally use Uthar to make a strat for free, and you suddenly give that unit full rerolls to hit. So you're hitting on 4s, full rerolls to hit, with a significant volume of firepower, can be quite impactful. For our 5th stratagem of this detachment, we have Claim Staker Reflex. Claim Staker Reflex in your opponent's movement phase just after an enemy unit ends a normal, advance, or fall back move. If you are within 9 inches of that enemy unit, you can use the stratagem spend 2 yield points, and you can make a normal move of up to d6. If you spent your yield points, you can move a flat 6 instead. So this is very powerful as well. I'm thinking here big units of bikes. If you have the yield point capacity and an enemy unit makes a move or falls back or anything like that, you spend the yield points, you move 6 flat, you just bring all those bikes with OC2 onto their objective. Very powerful for swinging primary. Last but not least, we have Dispersed Formation in your opponent's shooting phase. 1 Leagues of Votann unit from your army that was selected as a target of 1 or more of those attacks. You gain stealth and you have the benefit of cover. No more are we the ones afraid of stealth, for we now carry it ourselves. So that's up for the Persecutor's Prospect. I think this one's really fun. Personally, it's probably going to be one of the first ones I try out outside of Oathband, of course, the main one. I think this one is pretty cool. Fits kind of my playstyle for what I enjoy doing, and I just think if I'm going to buy 3 artillery pieces, I may as well try this out. Our 3rd detachment here is Optimal Application. Now, Optimal Application, at the end of your command phase, you gain 1 yield point for each objective marker you control that is not within your deployment zone and has 1 or more Iron Masters or Mimir strategist models from your army within range of it, up to a maximum of 2 per turn from this ability. So now, very quickly, we are ramping up the amount of yield points we get. You're getting them for being on the objectives from your main army rule, you're getting them for having the Mimir on the objective, and you're getting a bonus one because of this detachment letting your Mimir get 2 of them. So very quickly, you can easily ramp up and be able to acquire these right out the gate. In your shooting phase, each time a Brokir Ironkin Steel... What? In your shooting phase, each time a Brokir Steeljax or Arcanist Evaluator unit shoots, you could spend a yield point. And if you do, until the end of the phase, each time a model in that unit makes an attack, reroll a hit roll of 1. So you get reroll hit rolls of 1 for your big shooty units, so long as you expend your yield points for them, which you definitely will be able to, considering how easily you can acquire them in this detachment. We do have, of course, our 4 enhancements. First up, Forest Rider Node. Iron Master or Mirror Strategist model only. The models in the Bearer's unit have the Deep Strike ability. Oh my god, you could Deep Strike Thunderkin with this ability. Pretty powerful. I think if this was available throughout the index, I myself would have gone to the Thunderkin. So this is a very cool ability to have. Calculated Tenacity is up next. Iron Master or Mimir Strategist model only. While the bearer is leading a unit, add 1 to the objective control characteristic of models in that unit. I'll also just circle back to Forest Rider Node real quick because I just thought of this while I was reading the next one. You can essentially put this on the melee Steeljax with a Mimir, put them in Deep Strike, rapid ingress them down, and then heroic for free onto the objective. I think this is very powerful as well. But anyway, for Calculated Tenacity that I just read and didn't pay attention to, Iron Master or Mimir Strategist model only. While the bearer is leading a unit, add 1 to the objective control characteristic of models in that unit. Oh my god, that is good. That is really nice on your Steeljax especially. You basically bump up the whole unit. If you're running 6 plus a character, you bump it up from 7 to 14 OC. And then you get your Overwatch for free. And like, you know, if somebody brings 10 OC out onto the objective, it's probably going to be on some kind of like chaff or battle line. So you'll reliably be able to get that way under your threshold of where you're at in terms of unit capacity and OC on the objective. Okay, next up, Mantle of the Elders. So this one here is a Mimir strategist model only. Each time the bearer's unit is selected to shoot, if you spend yield points using the detachment ability to let you reroll ones, you roll a dice, and on a 2-up, you get your yield point back. So you basically almost guarantee that you're not actually spending any, so it's a net zero in terms of your expending for this resource. So a pretty solid ability to have. Last but not least, we have Votann Vault, and this is for an Iron Master model only. Essentially, after he has shot and fought, if he has attacked a vehicle or a monster unit and hit any of those attacks, the unit becomes suppressed until the next turn. So you subtract 1 from their hit roll. In terms of stratagem support for this detachment, we have Unwavering Accuracy. 1 broke your Thunderkin unit in the shooting phase that has not yet shot. Until the end of the phase, each time a model in this unit makes an attack, you can ignore any and all modifiers to the ballistic skill, hit roll, wound roll, or the armor penetration characteristic. This is Grim Demeanor in a stratagem format, which is very powerful. So as you can probably tell, this is the first time I'm reading this detachment specifically, and I think I'm liking this one quite a bit. The next one here we have is First Concern. So First Concern, your shooting phase just after a Brokier, Ironkin, Steeljax, or Arcanist Evaluator unit from your army has shot, that Brokier, Ironkin, Steeljax, or Arcanist Evaluator unit, if they remain stationary, they can make a normal move. Oh my god, that's really good. That is really good. You can move and scoot, shoot and scoot with your Steeljax, with your Thunderkin. You could come down from Deep Strike, shoot and move. Oh my god. Oh my god. What is this? What is this? Delayed Fire Rounds is up next. What's this one? Your shooting phase just after a Brokier, Ironkin, Steeljack, or Arcanist Evaluator unit has shot in your army. Select 1 enemy unit, excluding monsters and vehicles, hit by 1 or more of those attacks. Until the start of your next shooting phase, each time one of those units makes a normal, advance, or fallback move, roll a d6 for each model in that unit. For each one, the unit suffers 1 mortal wound, up to a maximum of 6. So it's kind of like you could theoretically get some extra damage through on a unit if it's a high wound count, a high model count unit that you've shot, and then let's say you weren't able to pick it up fully. If there are anything left over after they make a move on their turn, they'll take some residual damage on a d6 if you roll a 1 for each model left in the squad. We then have Wall of Steel for 1 CP. Your charge phase just after an Ironkin Steeljax unit from your army ends a charge move. Each time you use the strat, you can spend 2 yield points, and if you do, except for monsters or vehicles that you're attacking, for any other unit within engagement range of your unit, you roll a d6 for each model in your own unit, and on a 4-up, it suffers 1 mortal wound. So it's kind of like grenades in melee, which is kind of nice. So you have a unit of 6, they charge in, you pop the strat, you get your grenade dice basically on a 4-up, and you could theoretically chip something down pretty significantly. For number 5, we have Preventative Purge for 1 CP. Your opponent's movement phase just after an enemy unit ends a fallback move. A Brokier, Thunderkin, or Steeljax unit from your army can shoot as if it were your shooting phase. Wow. So it's essentially a second Overwatch, but specifically just for when the unit falls back. And there is a caveat, however, that you subtract 1 from the hit roll. So instead of hitting on 4s, you'll be hitting on 5s, unless you're on an objective marker, in which case it'll be +1, -1 negating, and you'll still hit on 4s. So depending on how you position yourself, you'll actually be rewarded for being on objectives or off of objectives, depending on what stance of the game you're in and how you line this unit up. This could be an extremely oppressive stratagem. Last but not least, we have Cogitated Need. So at the end of your opponent's movement phase, 1 Steeljax unit from your army can make a normal move. When doing so, your unit must end that move as close as possible to the closest objective marker. Wow. So you stack this guy up with the Mimir's enhancement to increase the OC value of the unit, and then after the opponent moves, you just make a normal move and get on the objective. And then you out-OC them and take it back from them. Wow. Okay, so I think this detachment is actually really strong. I didn't read this one. This is the only one I didn't get to while I was preparing to film the video. And I think this feels like Eldari. Just 2 detachments left now as we approach the one that is probably most anticipated for a lot of you here. This one here, of course, being the Berserker Battle Line Detachment. So Berserks here for your detachment rule, gain the Battle Line keyword and gain the Deep Strike ability. Massive. You have 4 enhancements here. So the first one in your reinforcement step of your movement phase, the bearer can use this enhancement. If it does, select 1 Berserk unit that is visible to the bearer and spend any number of yield points. You can return 1 destroyed model to that unit, and then for every 2 additional yield points you spend, you can return an additional model. So you could theoretically revive an entire squad of berserks if there's 1 left and you have the yield point capacity to do this. String them out in a big line, stack them all up on an objective. This is annoying. Now, thankfully, you can't do it so frequently because you're limited by the number of yield points that you have. But late game, if you stack them up, this can be extremely powerful for swinging the game. Next up, we have Multi-Wave System Jammer. Once per battle in your movement phase, if the bearer is on the battlefield, it can use this enhancement. If it does, select 1 friendly Chthonian that is in reserves until the end of the phase. Treat the current battle round number as being 1 higher than it actually is. So theoretically, if you have something in Deep Strike for your berserks, you could bring them down a turn earlier, so turn 1. You can also theoretically, if you want to run your artillery in reserves for some reason, you could bring that onto the board a turn earlier instead. So there is some very, very tricky little things going on here with this detachment to get your berserks closer to combat and sooner. And keep in mind, hostile acquisition lets you reroll all of your charge rolls. So if you come down from Deep Strike, you get access to those rerolls immediately. For number 3, we have Quake Supervisor, a Leagues of Votann model only. While the bearer is within 3 inches of 1 or more friendly artillery units, the bearer has the Lone Operative ability. At each time one of those artillery units makes a ranged attack and targets an enemy unit visible to the bearer, add 1 to the hit roll. So very interesting, because now we have potentially 3 instances of +1 to hit that we can stack on these artilleries and theoretically make them agnostic to shooting on or off of objectives. So you can shoot and be on BS4 theoretically to anything on the battlefield. Last but not least, Pile Driver. So a Leagues of Votann model, each time the bearer's unit is selected to fight, the bearer can use this enhancement. If it does, spend up to 2 yield points, and until the end of the phase, add the number of yield points you just spent to the damage characteristic of the bearer's melee weapons. E-champs love this, clearly. Now quickly moving through the stratagems here, we have Cyberstim Infusion in the fight phase, a Chthonian berserk unit from your army that has not been selected to fight this phase. Each time you use the stratagem, you can spend 2 yield points until the end of the phase. Each time a model in your unit makes an attack, reroll a wound roll of 1. If you spend yield points, you reroll the wound roll instead. Oh baby, this is strong. So this, I think, helps compensate significantly for losing access to the +1 to wounds, specifically if you're running this detachment, obviously. Getting full reroll wound rolls is very powerful, extremely impactful, especially if you consider that on the berserks, you could kit them out to have anti-vehicle 3 or anti-monster 3. So you will almost always get whatever wound rolls you roll through to your target. Next up, Unstoppable Force. In the fight phase, 1 Votann unit from your army that has not been selected to fight this phase, so not limited to just berserks. Until the end of the phase, each time a unit piles in or consolidates, each model in that unit moves up to 6 inches instead of up to 3. So again, we're seeing kind of like the dismemberment of the Hearth band detachment being put into things that are just strictly better, unfortunately. A very good stratagem to make sure you get all of your models on a big brick of 10 into combat. Augmented Assault is our 3rd stratagem here in your movement phase. So 1 Chthonian berserk unit from your army that has not been selected to move this phase. Each time you use this stratagem, you can spend up to 2 yield points. In the end of your turn, until the end of your turn, add X to the move characteristic of models in this unit, where X is the number of yield points you spent, and you can declare a charge in a turn in which you advanced. Wow. Okay, so let's unpack this one for a little bit. A lot of words. So essentially, you pick a unit, you pick your berserk unit, and you say, hey, I'm going to spend 2 yield points. I'm going to increase their movement speed by 2. Additionally, I get advance and charge. Additionally, my army rule, if I'm in hostile acquisition, lets me reroll my advance rolls, reroll my charge rolls. You go anywhere you want. It is very strong. Tectonic Fracture up next for 1 CP. Your shooting phase just after the Earthshaker artillery unit has shot. You select your Earthshaker unit. You can spend up to 2 yield points. Select one enemy unit hit by one or more of your unit's attacks this phase until the start of your next shooting phase. Subtract 2 from that unit's move characteristic. And if you spent yield points during this use of stratagem, subtract 2 from charge rolls for that unit as well. So if you spend yield points, you get multiple benefits here. You slow them down natively, and if you spend the yield points, you reduce their charge capabilities as well. Weave Work Buttress is up next here. Your opponent's shooting phase just after an enemy unit has selected its targets. If units from your army have hostile acquisition, one infantry unit from your army that was selected as the target of one or more attacks from that enemy unit. Until the end of the phase, each time your opponent attacks you, subtract 1 from the wound roll. Okay, so a little bit more of a defensive buff here. Suddenly you can stack this up onto things like your berserks who have the 4-up Feel No Pain. You can even apply to things like the humble Hearthkin warrior who now has the invulnerable save, Feel No Pain, and access to potentially even -1 to be wounded. This just guarantees that you live longer, you're more durable, and it's independent of you, of course, being in the other phase, the hostile acquisition, because otherwise you would just get it natively. Hidden Access Ways is the final stratagem of this detachment for 1 CP. At the end of your opponent's fight phase, one Berserk, Warrior, or Jaeger unit from your army that is not within engagement range of one or more enemy units. Remove your unit from the battlefield and place it into strategic reserves. You yeet the 10-man Berserks in, they delete a unit, they disappear, and leave the table again. And guess what? If I recall, there were some stratagems here or some enhancements that facilitated you coming back from reserves earlier. So some very interesting combos here. It's a lot of movement tricks again as well. Last but not least, we have the Transport Detachment. So for this one here, all of your transports gain this ability. So any vehicle with a transport capacity, I should specify. So it's not just dedicated transports, it's vehicles with transport capacity. So land fortresses should provide this buff as well. And essentially, infantry units that are wholly within 6 inches of that vehicle that has a transport capacity get sustained hits 1 to their shooting output. So this is really nice as well because, as you can probably imagine, almost all your things are going to be starting the game in transports. So you could have your transports bring units up, they get out, they get some kind of added benefit, which is amplifying their output. In terms of enhancements, we have Tactical Alchemy. So a cowl model only in your command phase if the bearer's unit is within range of one or more objective markers you control that are not within your deployment zone, you can spend 1 yield point. If you do, roll a d6. On a 4-up, you gain a CP. Pretty nice. We finally have access to CP farming. Then we have Cyber Implants, Trivarg Cyber Implants. So a Leagues of Votann model in your shooting phase, each time the bearer's unit is selected to shoot, if it disembarked from a transport this turn, or if you spend 2 yield points, until the end of the phase, ranged weapons equipped by models in that unit have the Sustained Hits 2 ability. So yet again, we're seeing some very strong interactions here, utilizing your vehicles and transports to provide units that disembark significant output. And I will take this time to remind you all that guess who can go inside of land fortresses? Steeljacks. So, and Brokir Thunderkin. So there's a potential here for you to actually get some really solid buffs out for free, no CP. You just spend your yield points and get these benefits coming out of the transport. Our third enhancement, Precursive Judgment, a cowl model only. While the bearer's unit is wholly within 6 inches of one or more friendly Leagues of Votann transport units, you can target the bearer's unit with the Fire Overwatch stratagem for 0 CP. And hits are scored on unmodified hit rolls of 5. So you can actually get your Hearthguard to Overwatch on 5s. Again, I'm a little gutted at the Hearthguard getting gutted, but again, there is some utility here with the lethal hit stacking and the cowl's ability to provide yield points when it kills something. There could be potentials where this comes up. Last but not least, Signature Restoration, Iron Master model only. Each time a friendly Leagues of Votann model is repaired using the bearer's ability to repair vehicles, it regains an additional lost wound. So this is cute. I like this a lot. So if you have a full healthy squad and your little assistant is alive still, you can heal vehicles for 4. Significant. All right, and now moving into the last set of stratagems for this final detachment. Of course, we have Secure Positions. At the end of any phase, if units from your army have hostile acquisition, You target 1 Leagues of Votann transport unit from your army. The Leagues of Votann unit embarked within your transport can disembark, and it has to be set up wholly within 6 inches of the transport. Any phase you could disembark as long as you're in hostile acquisition. Any phase. That is insanely powerful because your opponent can finish their turn and say, okay, I am on these objectives. At the end of their turn, you say, okay, you're done your fight phase, you're done your shooting phase, there's nothing else that could attack. Okay, I'm going to just get all these warriors out and stand on the objective. 5 points of primary. Incredibly powerful. I think this is the strongest one inside of the whole suite for this detachment. So this is going to be a game-winning strat. Very strong utility in primary play. Bastion running is the next one here. So 1 land fortress in your movement phase, it can move through walls. So I haven't really ever had a problem navigating the land fortresses, especially on GW terrain, but it's always nice to have if someone sets up a move block potentially in one of the access lanes, I should say. You just spend this strat and move through a wall instead. So it's pretty handy. Then we have Illuminated Priority. Your shooting phase just after a Leagues of Votann vehicle from your army has shot. You target the vehicle, select 1 enemy unit hit by 1 or more of those attacks until the end of the phase. Each time a Leagues of Votann infantry model from your army makes an attack that targets it, you reroll a hit roll of 1. So essentially, you just shoot a target, and then the rest of your infantry and the rest of your army gets the benefit of rerolling hit rolls of 1 against that target. Next up, Inexorable Efficiency. Your shooting phase, 1 Leagues of Votann unit from your army. It is eligible to shoot in a turn at which it fell back. So just fall back and shoot, so people are going to struggle to tie up your vehicles a little bit more. Opportunistic Escalation is stratagem number 5 here. So in your opponent's shooting phase, just after an enemy unit has shot, if units from your army have hostile acquisition. So if you're in that turn 1, if you're in that army rule 1 version, hostile acquisition, you can select a vehicle unit from your army, excluding land fortresses, that was hit by 1 or more of those attacks, and make a normal move of up to D6. So if somebody is thinking that they'll be able to swing you off a point or swing you out of a firing lane by picking up your unit, and they don't do it in one go, you can move out of the way, you can move forward, you can go wherever you want. So a reactive move after your shot is a really nice tool to have that other armies have access to, and I don't think I ever dreamed that we'd get that. So pretty nice to see here as well for some support, and understandably not usable on a land fortress. Last but not least, for 2 CP, we have Vengeance Flare. Essentially what this one does is, by default, when you use this strat, it takes place after an enemy has selected and shot an infantry unit. You select a vehicle that was within 6 inches of that infantry unit. It has to be a Sagittar or a Capri Sun, and that unit gets to shoot back at the target. So if I shoot your warriors, your Sagittar that's next to them shoots me back. I said land fortress because if you spend 2 yield points in addition to the CP, it's land forts that become eligible as well. So suddenly, if somebody wants to shoot your humble warriors and they're next to a land fortress, well, the land fortress might get to shoot them back. So a pretty cool strat. It's kind of like reactive reprisal, but there's a few more hoops to jump through. But again, it's something that's available in one detachment, and now you can kind of get it in the other one too. All right, so that is everything for the initial kind of flip through of this codex. What are my initial thoughts? Now, I think right out the gate, if you are looking strictly at this from the perspective of, I played Votann for 2 years, this is not Votann anymore, they suck, I think that you will be disappointed, of course, because losing +1 to hit, +1 to wound, and the ease of use of which you can play the game through that index detachment is gone. It's not the same army anymore. However, I think that this codex did a phenomenal job of taking an army that was honestly extremely basic, and I don't want to say boring to play. I want to say like boring in terms of rule set, and just elevated it to the next level. We actually feel like a real force. This is a real army now that has rules that other armies have. We do things that no other army can do. We play the transport game incredibly well, and we have so many tools, I think now, that are extremely powerful for primary especially. And primary is what wins you the game. So the army and the army rule and the stratagems and the detachments and the units, I think all cohesively come together to support this new playstyle. You've always played with Votann, they always played 40k very well. It's no surprise that's why they were so good. They were very efficient. They were hard to stat check. I think now you can't just brute force it if somebody comes at you. You need to be a little bit more tactical. You need to be a little bit more techie with when you design your lists. And I think a lot of units have been shaken up in a way that there are more opportunities for synergy between your units. We didn't really have data card synergy before. They were just raw stat lines and very efficient stratagems. Now, this is an army. This is a toolbox. And you have all the tools you need to not only still keep playing a game of 40k, but play a very fun one. So I am absolutely thrilled. I know some people are going to be disappointed, I'll be honest, about losing +1 to wound and the grudge tokens, but I am extremely grateful that we've shifted away from that playstyle and we actually feel like a cohesive, designed army now that has a ton of tools and a ton of things that you can bring to the game and to the table to fill any one of these problems, answer them, and just play very effectively. I will say the one thing that concerns me, however, and again, maybe it's just because I didn't really get to play it yet. Obviously, nobody did. The army still has a lot of low AP shots, and the loss of ignore cover does frighten me a little bit. I'm not so much concerned as I initially was with the +1 to hit, +1 to wound stuff, because there's just, as we just saw, right? It's been like an hour and a half I'm talking. There's an abundance of stratagems here that compensate for that. There's an abundance of tools added to our roster to play around it. You don't need to just efficiently kill things. You have tricks. You have like Eldari level of tricks in some of these detachments for movement shenanigans, OC stacking, things like that, playing primary. So I'm not so much worried on that front. I think I'm just kind of worried about, like, even if you are playing that game well, it's a lot of low AP and you don't have access to ignore cover, and if things pop armor contempt, like, they'll effectively always be saving on 3s. If they have cover, they'll still be saving on 3s. So I'm a little bit concerned about that front, but there are some units that, of course, have higher AP counts, lethal hits to help mitigate. So we'll have to just play around and see, but for now, I am extremely excited. I am still very optimistic, and this has essentially made me 10 out of 10 eager to get this on the table. So anyway, that's all I got for you guys today. Like I said, very initial thoughts on the initial, like, just read through of what the Codex is. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. How do you feel about the data sheets? How do you feel about the army rule? What do you think about the detachments? Which one's your favorite? Which one's your least? Personally, I think they're all very exciting for very different reasons. There are a few, maybe just a couple, that feel a little bit too catered towards a specific unit type, but they're all quite broad enough that you can take a very diverse roster of units and gain almost full benefits, which to me is a sign of a very well-designed tool set and rule set, I should say. So thanks so much for watching. Really appreciate it, guys, and I will catch you all in the next one.